Sweet. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, here we go. So, hi, I'm Katie Marrotte. In case you haven't seen my posts all over the group, I am a person with lived experience, meaning I have OCD. I've had OCD since I was a kid, and didn't get proper diagnosis and treatment until I was already in my 30s. So it had quite a lot of time to proliferate and wreck my life up until that point. So I'm going to take you through a round trip guided tour into the OCD bubble from an I-CBT perspective, from both the literature and from my lived experience. I had a pretty terrible February, and I'm going to walk you through why. So please feel free to giggle, laugh. This is supposed to be entertaining and fun. I laugh at my OCD all day, every day. It's ridiculous now that I see what the heck is going on behind the curtain. If I laugh at it, it's not scary. So this is supposed to be funny. So please don't feel bad for laughing at my suffering, because I do it all the time. So let's get started. I won't be singing, but I'll read this to you. So come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. This is what the OCD bubble is. This is an imaginative experience that we have when we leave reality, when we leave the here and now and dissociate into the imagination. And that's one of the things I really love about I-CBT, is that the role of the imagination is expounded in a way that isn't in ERP, ACT, mindfulness, any of the other treatments for OCD. It really highlights this really important piece that's part of the sequence, right? So the OCD bubble is an imaginative experience that has nothing to do with the here and now. So when it comes to OCD, reality and the imagination are really two separate worlds, and you are entering the imagination with that first thought that gets you beyond the senses. That's the crossover point. The worst part, however, is that as soon as you cross over into the imagination, it is very difficult to get back into the world of the senses or reality. This is often described by people with OCD as being in a bubble or a circle. There is a sense that you are sucked into something from where there is no escape, no matter how hard you try. And you are indeed sucked into something. You are sucked inside the world of the imagination. Welcome to the OCD bubble. So this is a safety reminder from OCD. Please keep your hands, legs, and reasoning processes within the bubble at all times. This is a round trip ticket. We will be returning by the bridge, but it may take several crossings before we make our full return, just to be sure. So we're going to go into the bubble, but I promise I'll take you back. So here's the anatomy of the OCD bubble. First of all, it's a dissociative state. This is imaginal absorption. It's a high focus, low alert state. So you're very absorbed in what's going on up here without very much contact with what's going on around you. One of the hallmarks of this state that I see in clients and in myself is something that happens with the gaze. So we see in the here and now, my gaze is very focused on the camera, on this presentation. And the minute that I slip into the imaginal dissociation, the imaginal absorption, and go into the OCD bubble, and you'll notice this in clients too, is that the gaze stops being straightforward and starts to kind of drift off somewhere into the distance. And to me, that's a red flag that somebody has lost contact with here and now, right? They're leaving the present reality to attend to something that's in the imagination. It is a dissociative state. I like to tell this to clients because it's something that they don't even notice. And we can make them do it in session. Hey, go into the OCD bubble, figure out what one of your really precious obsessions is, and I want you to go there for about a minute, and then I'll call you back. I stole this from Carl Robbins, by the way. Okay, cool. Bring it back. What's the first thing that you noticed about what your eyes did? Okay, right. So they are staring at me in session, and then you started thinking about something. You left the present moment, and your eyes slid from looking straight ahead to gazing somewhere in the distance. Red flag. That's how we know you're gone, right? And then I asked them, how did you bring it back? oh, I called you back, right? So the first thing that you did was snap yourself out of this dissociative state and start tending to the here and now in the moment, which is exactly what we're looking for when we want to coach someone through leaving the bubble. So some of the other aspects of being in the OCD bubble is it actually increases stresses and anxiety. This is a very seductive state that people with OCD will slide into with no problem whatsoever, right? It feels very functional. It feels very pressing. It feels very responsible to attend to stuff that's going on within the bubble. And a lot of times we think that, oh, if I just solve this problem, right? If I go into the bubble and I solve this imaginary problem, I'm going to feel less stress. It's going to resolve my doubt, and it's going to help me feel more secure. All of the opposite is true. It increases your stress. It makes the doubt worse, and it decreases your ability to feel secure. This is a lived-in experience. So this is accompanied by really vivid imagined images of maybe their feared consequence of what's going to happen if the obsession comes true. There might also be some bodily sensations that come when you're dissociated into this experience, like feeling contaminated, feeling floaty, feeling like you've lost contact with the here and now, with your body. This state goes beyond the senses. It goes beyond the five senses, right? So it goes beyond what you see, hear, touch, taste, smell. There's no sense evidence that this thing is happening in the here and now. And there's also a distrust in the senses, which we'll go over later. So that it is maintained by distrust in your senses in the here and now. There's this feeling that we can't trust what we see or hear, or we can't trust ourselves. We have to solve the problem within the bubble. Guess what? It never works. Like I said before, it decreases security and increases stress. The strategies that we use to keep us safe actually make us less safe. Because we're going into this dissociative state, it narrows our focus. Again, this is a high focus, low alert state. So we are actually less aware of the stuff that's going on around us. We're less aware of actual risk. I mean, I could be sitting here dissociating and worrying about X, Y, and Z, and there could be people downstairs robbing my house. Right? I might not even notice because I'm so absorbed in the stuff that's going on up here. It's kind of paradoxical. Other examples are excessive hand washing might destroy your skin, which makes you more susceptible to infection. Checking with your partner, making sure that the relationship is okay, actually ends up pushing your partner further away. Locking and relocking a lock wears the lock out faster. So we're doing all of these strategies to solve this imaginary problem, and that's actually ending up making us less secure in the here and now. And second, attempting to solve an imaginary problem to resolve your anxiety increases your anxiety. Being in the bubble provides an illusion of a solution. It takes a lot of unnecessary effort to anticipate, prepare, neutralize whatever the function of the compulsion is. Takes a ton of effort and makes you feel more stress. So I say to my clients, hey, no wonder you're always tired, right? It's not a B12 deficiency. It's not stress. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's that you're using so much of your brain power to solve an imaginary problem that you're exhausted all the time. You probably feel like you need to sleep. You probably have tension headaches all the time, right? You probably have muscle tension. There's all kinds of stuff that flows from this increase in anxiety that we can also help clients address. Another facet of being in the OCD bubble is that doubt makes more doubt. So you go into the OCD bubble trying to resolve this doubt. Guess what? That's not happening. It's going to make the doubt worse. So here's an example of where somebody might use a normal doubting process and their sense information to solve a problem. This winter, we had little baby chickens, little peeps in a brooder box in our garage. And I don't know if any of you have chickens, but everything loves the taste of chicken, including people. and raccoons and foxes and stray cats and coyotes and everything and anything is going to want to eat your baby chickens. So we have them in the garage. My husband, who doesn't have OCD, thank God, will just habitually leave his garage door open. So his thinking might be, oh, did I close the garage door? I don't want anything to eat the chicks. Oh, the garage door is open. I guess I'll close the garage door. Problem solved. We can walk away now, right? Yes, if you don't have OCD, you can walk away because you're trusting your sense information. By the way, if someone with OCD is able to do this, the OCD, it doesn't have a foothold, right? We're using our sense information to solve a problem. Your brain gets the stop signal, problem solved. We don't have to worry about it anymore. The action is taken, the problem is over. Let me move on with my life. If we are approaching this with an obsessional doubt, we might distrust the evidence from our eyes that says the garage door is closed, right? And if you're not trusting what your senses are telling you, and instead you're trusting the OCD, which counters with, well, what if it's not closed all the way? Okay, but my eyes say that it is closed all the way, but there's a problem here. Why would I get this thought if that wasn't true? Right? We're trusting the OCD instead of our sense information. And if I'm doing that, I must come to the conclusion that, oh, that must not be closed. Okay, maybe I'll go check it, right? Maybe I'll go look. Maybe I will go out there and really scrutinize it. Maybe I will open it and close it again so that my brain gets the message, hey, this thing is closed, you can walk away now. Here's where I-CBT differs from traditional ERP. We're told you have to tolerate the uncertainty, walk away from the door. Maybe it's open, maybe it's closed. Okay, but hey, if it is open, my chickens are gonna die and that's not a risk that I'm willing to take. I'm gonna go check the damn door, right? I-CBT differs from ERP by saying there was a moment in the sequence where you did have certainty. And that is right here, right? I had certainty the moment I said, did I close the garage door? Oh, the garage door is open. I'm using my eyes. Let me close the garage door. Done. Certainty. I can walk away now, right? But there's a crossover point where that stops being enough, where the sense of my eyes stops being enough to tell me that that door is closed. So the OCD will come in with more doubt and go, what if it's not closed all the way? There it is. That's the moment that I have now left reality, where I've left certainty behind in favor for this story that maybe my eyes aren't working and maybe this door is not closed all the way, right? I'm in the bubble. I have just entered the bubble. I have left the here and now where the evidence of my senses was enough. I am now favoring the obsessive story that says that's not enough. You need to look deeper. So what do we do with that information? What do we do when somebody has crossed the bridge? So first you have to, I help the client identify what's the thought that took you beyond your senses. What is the thought that took you from knowing in the here and now to doubting in the OCD bubble? And we're going to ask them to hold off on doing anything about that problem, hold off on attending to that doubt for at least a minute. Now you're on the bridge, right? Now, and another thing I love about I-CBT is that it restores agency. You get to choose if you're going to fall for this trick or not. You get to choose if you're going to come back to the moment where you had certainty and your eyes told you the door is closed, or are you going to go into the bubble where you can't trust your eyes, you can't trust your senses, you can't trust yourself, your memory, your perception, your intention, whatever it is that you are mistrusting, right? This is how, with consistency, we can help clients restore their self-trust. So once they're on that bridge, they have a choice. Are you going to go into the OCD bubble, or are you going to bring it back to the here and now and walk away from this thing and stop telling yourself the story? You're going to refocus your attention on the here and now, where you can make a values-based decision instead of an anxiety-based decision. This is where I like to bring a little bit of ACT in. If you're in the here and now, you get to decide what your behavior is based on your values. So if checking and rechecking this door is taking somebody away from spending time with their family, having peace and quiet, what are we going to do? We're going to coach them to make a values-based decision that's going to steer them away, right? We're going for a towards move, not an away move. And any residual anxiety, feelings of being incomplete, or any other dysregulative experience that the client is having as a result of telling themselves the story will resolve with time. It might take a little time. Their nervous system has been hijacked. In the same way that watching a horror movie or even an action movie can hijack your system to produce all of these symptoms of, an increased heart rate, sweatiness, tingling, whatever the sensation is. It is not an invitation to re-engage. It's not evidence that something is wrong. It's evidence that the nervous system has been hijacked by going into the bubble. Here's how I help clients troubleshoot, because this is a very common sense approach to getting the heck out of the bubble. But I get some pushback, and I get some questions about, well, how do I do that? One of the complaints that I hear most often is, well, it feels real. It's a justification that clients use, and maybe even I use sometimes, to go back into the bubble. Feeling real is not evidence that something is wrong. It's evidence that your imagination was hijacked. And the anxiety that you feel from that is a byproduct of being in the bubble, not an invitation to go back, right? So we look for what are the things that are hooking them back in. Another justification might be, it feels irresponsible, risky, or reckless to leave the bubble, which to me means they're still stuck in the story. Maybe we can go back and work through modules 1 through 5 to really help them defuse from the story and understand where it's coming from, because there's something here that's still keeping them caught up in this loop. What if I leave the bubble and something really bad happens? Okay, it's a secondary OCD story, right? You can deconstruct that with them and sequence it out the same way that you would sequence out any other obsessive story. I like to remind clients that OCD is self-reinforcing. It wants you to come back. It will do anything it can to get you to come back into the bubble, right? So one of the modules that I also love, by the way, I love all of them, and then I can't pick favorites, but I'm going to pick some favorites, is Tricks and Cheats of the OCD Con Man. So that is another one that might help a client troubleshoot where they're getting stuck on leaving the bubble. And we're going to look for other justifications and facts taken out of context. Again, the Tricks and Cheats of the OCD Con Artist is excellent for doing that. Seeing where they're still getting tripped up on the logical process here that brings them back into this dissociative state. I also like to realign the client with their values. How is staying in the bubble affecting other things in your life? Where are your values being hijacked and used as justification? And an example of that is, well, I really value my safety. Okay, is your value of safety overriding all of the other values in your life? Can we give some of your other values a little bit of stage time and maybe work on drawing back from this one a little bit? And again, remind them that sensory data is all that they need to make a decision, and going beyond the senses to make a decision is going back into the bubble. All you need is your 5 senses, right? I'm going to steal again from Carl. Carl likes to say, if the information and the evidence didn't come from your retina, right? It didn't pass through your eyes and instead was generated behind your eyes, it's probably OCD. People without OCD do not use this reasoning process to attend to issues in their life. And there's a lot of places in a person's with OCD's life where they do not use this reasoning process to make a decision. It's just 5 or 6 certain precious things. And I like to highlight that for them as well. Where is it that you're using your sense information to navigate the world, and that's enough for you? Why are you not using your sense information in this area right here? And, you know, it's vulnerable self-theme. It's the obsessive story. On to me, star of the show. I had a terrible February. And on an average day, I'm subclinical. I really do not have very many issues with OCD, thanks largely to I-CBT. I did ERP and ACT with a wonderful therapist. It only got me so far until we started playing whack-a-mole with exposures, which was very irritating and very exhausting. I-CBT helped me understand what's the machinations that are happening behind the curtain that keep me coming back to this. Where am I still getting hooked? And it helped me see it in a much different, clearer, and richer way. And once I had that understanding, I had an informed choice of what am I going to do with this information? It was a very different, very common sense way of looking at my own OCD that I was able to get subclinical without using medication. And by the way, at my worst, I was not leaving the house. So, and on a great day, I'm even grateful to have the experience of OCD and all of the privileges that recovery has given me, like a career that I love. Being an OCD therapist is the best job in the world. I have the best job ever. And I get to use my lived experience and my suffering to help people without OCD understand what this is really like. I think that's the best. But OCD hates everything new, even good things, and anything that can be perceived as mildly threatening. So if you were paying attention to the news at all, do you remember what happened in February? Probably, right? Schmuck decided, let's invade Ukraine. Great. Hey. And everybody in this training who is, oh my God, who is above 35 is like, oh, first time with your life being threatened by a nuclear bomb, huh? Good luck, kid. So this is where OCD likes to make everything about me. There is a war happening that is several thousand miles and several time zones away, but I'm going to make this all about me. So Russia invades Ukraine. There's the trigger. I ask a what if question. What if they drop a nuke? Ah, right? Oh my God, that's so scary. What if they drop a nuke and we have a nuclear winter and everything that I know and love is threatened? Oh my God, I better prepare, right? So here's me, by the way, this little green over here. Here's Ukraine in pink. There's, by the way, an entire ocean separating us. There's not only an entire ocean separating us, there is also all these little countries in between who could very easily intercept a nuke if Russia were to decide to pop off and nuke Connecticut of all places, right? Doesn't matter. There's no logic here. I saw, oh my God, war. Oh no, Russia's a nuclear superpower. Oh no, I'm in danger. Wrong. By the way, if I had any success in predicting anything that was going to go wrong in my life, I would be on an episode of I Shouldn't Be Alive. So if I were to chart out all of the catastrophic predictions that OCD told me was going to happen over the course of the 25, almost 30 years that it was able to run rampant on my life, I would probably still have a 0% success rate. So I like to do that with my clients too. What's your success rate for predicting bad things that's going to happen? Yeah. When are you going to decide to stop listening, right? If you had a friend who everything they told you was wrong, all the advice that they gave you was wrong, would you still go to them for advice? No, right? Why continue to go to OCD for decision-making if every single prediction that it's ever made is wrong? And you know what? Sometimes once in a while, maybe there's one that's right. Okay, great. Gonna steal from Mike Hetty here for a second. A broken clock is still right twice a day, but it's a shitty way to tell time. Right? So let's talk about the vulnerable self theme that is informing me absolutely freaking out in the last week of February. Contamination. Oh my God, we could get sick from nuclear fallout. My house is 300 years old. How am I going to prevent the nuclear fallout from getting in all of the chimneys? Because all of the rooms are connected by a central chimney in the middle of the house. Oh my God, you can't. By the way, the foundation is original, and every time it rains, water and sand washes into my house. How am I going to prevent nuclear fallout from getting into my house? I can't. Harm. People I love could be hurt. And responsibility, oh my God, if I don't take every single precaution that I possibly can, everybody I know and love is going to die, and it's going to be my fault. So I seem to have this fantasy that it's like this post-apocalypse wasteland, and I am just, I'm the lone survivor, and everybody around me has died because I didn't have enough iodine tablets. Darn. So comes back to my vulnerable self theme. I could fail to protect the people that I love. And this is a theme that has plagued me since childhood. I don't know who was letting me watch Sci-Fi Channel at 8 years old, but there was a real big string of disaster movies that came out in the 90s that absolutely wrecked me. Tornadoes. Oh my God. Twister. That's who was not supervising my TV time. What, Dante's Peak? Okay, so now I'm terrified of tornadoes and terrified of volcanoes, which, by the way, don't happen in Connecticut. Does that matter to my OCD? Absolutely not. It just doesn't factor in. So I have a problem. Not only do I have OCD, I also love movies, TV, books, podcast, video games, and weird history. In other words, I love dissociating into other people's imaginations. Cool. It gives my OCD a huge library of bullshit to pull from to make this obsession seem credible to me, to make it seem like a really great idea for me to stay within the bubble. So here's where it's pulling from when I have this obsession of what if Russia drops a nuke? Uh-oh, I watched Chernobyl, which was a great show, but really bad for me. Oh my God, The Road, great movie. Terrible if you have harm obsessions and if you have obsessions about failing to protect the people you love in the case of a nuclear event. Bad, except that was a volcano. Doesn't matter. Book of Eli, really good movie. More post-apocalypse. Doomsday Preppers, my favorite. How many people on this show have OCD? I would bet it's a lot of them. Walking Dead, doesn't matter. It's post-apocalypse. Is there a nuclear event? No, but something bad happens and puts everyone at risk. That's all I need. Oh, and video games, of course, the perennial favorite, Fallout, great series. Last of Us, again, fungus zombies, not post-apocalypse, doesn't matter. Still informing all of this. It's pulling from all these different genres to give me this very vivid lived-in experience of what could happen if this obsession comes true. Then it starts coming in with out-of-context facts. Oh, nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island. Nuclear accidents happen. That's bad. I'm right next to the navel of the biggest submarine base on the East Coast, about 20 miles away. Oh no, that's a target. Yikes. And oh my God, I found this map and it was such a disaster because it's talking about what if somebody dropped a nuke on all of these places in Connecticut, how many people would be affected? Oh no, stop compulsive Googling. So, right, here's what I'm imagining happening. I watched Terminator. Somebody should have stopped me from watching that too when I was about 8 years old. So it's a very vivid lived-in experience because I might be sitting here and I might be talking to a client and I am seeing in my mind's eye, it's not a hallucinatory experience, but damn is it close. I am seeing a bomb drop on the field right outside my house. And I am being obliterated to smithereens in my imagination. Oh my God, I need to focus on work. My client's having a hard time. I can't pull myself out of this bubble. Yikes, right? What are my compulsions? Compulsive research. By the way, if you guys haven't seen this horrible website, now you have. So this is a simulator that I found. Oh no, that lets you simulate what it would be like if somebody dropped a bomb on a specific target. Why did I do this to myself? all right, cool. We're gonna do, I don't know, we'll do this this big bomb. We're gonna do an air burst, and we're gonna do the casualties and look at the radioactive fallout, and then we're gonna hit detonate. By the way, I'm up in here, right? So I'm about halfway between New York and Boston. All of these out of context facts. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, the fatalities just keep going up and up and up. That's a lot of people who could die. I could be one of them. Yikes. Okay. I don't know who made that. They shouldn't have. Or maybe I should have some self-control and not look at it. Right. So here's what I'm doing. I'm researching. I'm looking at the CDC. I'm looking for fallout shelters. I'm looking at prepping websites. How do I stop nuclear fallout from getting into my water? Oh my God, I shouldn't have looked. I'm planning. What are we going to do for food? What are we going to do for fresh water? What are we going to do for shelter? What are we going to do with our pets? What are we going to do with our chickens? How am I going to get to my grandma who's 20 miles away? She can't drive. She's 88. She can barely see. How is she going to get to my house if something bad happens? Oh my God, I am firmly 2 feet into the bubble. Holy moly. And I'm checking. I'm looking at news. I'm looking at social media. I'm looking at Reddit live feeds. Oh God, who made this thing? And I'm talking to my friends who, by the way, are largely as neurotic as I am, which is a nightmare scenario. Every solution that I am attempting while I am in the bubble is compulsive, because I'm following this storyline. I'm treating it as if it's actually true, as if it's actually pressing, as if it's actually going to happen. And the compulsions are getting me nowhere. I am in this bubble and I am stuck in there. My brain won't give me the stop signal when I'm ruminating, because there's no applying a practical solution to an imaginary problem. So my brain won't tell me, all right, you're good. You figured out all the contingencies. It's time to stop. There's no resolution. In the same way that there's no arguing with the conspiracy theorists. They just keep coming back with more out of context facts, more information, more stories, more scenarios for me to solve. And as a result, I'm getting more and more and more and more anxious. The only winning move here is not to play, by the way. So here's what I think I look like while I'm planning for the apocalypse. Sarah Connor from Terminator. Here's what I actually look like. I look like Bubble Boy because I'm firmly in the bubble. So here's how I cross the bridge, or how I learned to stop worrying and love the bomb, which didn't exist, by the way. I identified the crossover point. Here's the information that I had in February. Russia has invaded Ukraine unprovoked. Russia has nuclear weapons, which are highly dangerous. That's here and now information. That's all I know. That's all I need to know. In that moment, I was still safe. I had no information to suggest otherwise. The information came from behind my eyes. The call was coming from inside the house. Here's the crossover point. I had that information, and then I asked a what if question about it. Well, what if Russia drops a nuke, and then we have a nuclear winter, which would mean we could all die from fallout? I need to get prepared, right? Which leads to the question is, all right, I have OCD, I've been in treatment, I know all of this. Why was it so hard for me to get back? Because it took me several days to stop telling the story. First of all, it hit on multiple themes, right? It hit on harm, it hit on contamination, it hit on responsibility, and there's multiple storylines. And every solution I came up with in the bubble made 5 more storylines appear, like a hydra. There's a lot of out of context facts that I was using. And I kept getting hooked by reality. And by reality, I mean possible stories about what was happening. I had free access to 24/7 news. I have friends who are preppers who reinforced my fears, who texted me and said, my bug out bag is packed, we're ready to go. Oh no, people with OCD, without OCD are also worried. That's bad, right? Because sometimes I will outsource my trust to other people so that they can tell me when it's time to be worried. And now they're worried. Fuck. Oh no. I had some lifestyle stuff that was affecting my cognitive ability to resist going into the bubble. And this I bring up because it's really important to look for this in clients. I had I had hormones, right? Certain parts of my cycle, I know that my OCD gets louder. I also had 25 years of unmedicated, untreated OCD. So those pathways and crossing into the bridge, very easy for me. That is very habitual. I also started ADHD medication. Guess what happens when you put a stimulant medication in someone with unmedicated OCD? Bad stuff, right? So during that time, I'm not eating very much. I'm not sleeping very much. Because I'm not eating or sleeping, I'm feeling more depressed than usual, and I stopped exercising. And at that time, Omicron was raging in Connecticut, so I had taken my entire practice telehealth, and I wasn't seeing anyone in person. Recipe for disaster. And then on the tail end of that, some shame that I had to deal with. I'm an OCD therapist. Shouldn't I know how to fix this? Shouldn't I know how to deal with this? And even though I had this beautiful support network, I didn't use it. And people were looking at each other going, wow, Katie's usually in the group chat 40 hours a week. Where is she? Yikes, right? Red flags all around. How did I get back? First, I identified the crossover point. I understood the logic and reasoning behind OCD. I have the privilege of having access to this treatment and to all of this information that I can use to help myself. And I have a network that helps me exercise that. I identified what are the out of context facts that my OCD is using to justify me going back into the bubble. Another thing that I like to ask is, how would I be feeling and acting if I had absolutely no access to this new information? Because the only thing that has changed for me all the way over here in Connecticut, not in a war zone, is that I had access to new information and I made up a story about it. So these unknown unknowns became known unknowns, which freaks me out. Don't like that. I like to know. And I'm adjusting the focus to the here and now, where none of these nightmare scenarios are happening to me, right? They're happening to someone else. Can we feel empathy and compassion for them, which is more in line in my values, instead of making this self-centered obsession about me and my safety and my failure to protect people from a situation that isn't happening and 5 months later hasn't happened. So again, it failed to predict anything that was actually going to happen to me. I had to get out, and then I had to stay out. So I had to identify and meet my needs that were missing. I had to call my psychiatrist and quit this medication. It wasn't working for me. I had to go get some sleep. I had to socialize. I was about 2 peanut butter sandwiches away from being able to cross the bridge because I wasn't feeding my body. I didn't have the cognitive capacity that I needed to make the decision to put in a little effort and do this work. And I had to get back to exercising because I was kind of a potato for a whole month and it wasn't good for me. I had to commit to response prevention. I had to make a commitment to my therapist and the people around me that I wasn't going to look at the news anymore. And I would have to trust that if something really terrible were happening, I would have to find out some other way. Somebody would have to tell me, right? I had to also set boundaries with friends who were prepping, who were going, oh my God, can we come to your house if the nuke goes off? No, stay home. I don't want you here because I'm going to be up here and I don't need anybody else in my house making me here. Okay, stay home, deal with it yourself. And I'm acting on values-based decisions instead of story-based decisions. So I'm getting saturated in life instead of stories. So I had fallen into this habitual pattern of staying home, getting lost in the bubble, allowing myself to stay there. And I needed to get up and I needed to get out of my house, frankly. So here is an actual conversation with my husband, who is a gem, who has been dealing with this with me for 10 years, who knows how to respond. And he responds by making fun of me. So I said, I've decided to stop caring. This is after about a week of absolutely wigging out. And he goes, oh yeah, is that why you were shopping for a $3,000 CBRN suit, which is a head to toe nuclear fallout suit? And I said, yes, but that was a different me. I was in the bubble. Here I am, actual footage of me burning the bridge. Here we go. That is it. That is my story. Thank you for listening to me ramble. Thank you for letting me share with you way too many outdated references to movies that I saw 20 years ago. If you have any questions, you can just let me know. Yay.
Katie, your references are the best. I love those references because maybe we have the same generation, but that was really funny and enjoyable because of that. And I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being so personal with your stories, because like that is the thing that teaches me the most, is the personal understanding of what it feels like. I wanted to ask a question about the bridge part, about the pause. So I have not emphasized the pausing on the bridge and seeing between the two worlds. And I was going through Bronwyn's slides for the kids yesterday, and she was emphasizing the pause. I was thinking about that coming into the discussion today. And your comment on the pause was like, don't compulse. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around what it feels like to be on the bridge, because it doesn't, I have the sense that it's not about resist compulsion, it's about don't pick a team or something like that. But I have a hard time finding the words to say like what's happening in that pause. I'm curious if you have a thought about that.
So in that moment, I find that it gives me and clients a really good opportunity to be curious, to go, okay, here I am, I'm meeting myself exactly where I am, and I'm recognizing I have two choices, right? I have agency in this moment before I decide to commit to going into the bubble. And that's what I like to focus on with clients, is like, you have a choice of what you're going to do. Are you going to fall for this con again, even though it's failed you 40,000 times? Or are you going to try something different? And are you going to drop into the here and now and trust that your sense evidence that something is wrong is going to tell you? Because looking for a solution while you're in the bubble isn't going to work. So I would say it's a lot like holding your breath, where you just go, okay, I see what's happening, right? I see what's happening. And because I see what's happening, I now get to make a choice with what I'm going to do with that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does it feel like accepting uncertainty for that minute before you choose, or is that not an accurate description?
I mean, I guess you could put it that way, where it's like, all right, there is a lot of acceptance in that moment. If I'm going to accept that this is dysregulating, right? I'm not doing anything. This is a little bit of response prevention. I'm not doing any compulsions right now. There might be a secondary consequence to that. I might feel kind of anxious standing on the bridge. I might feel really uncertain standing on the bridge. And that's not only okay, it's absolutely normal, right? It might feel like there's something unfinished that I need to be doing. That's okay.
For me, Jeremy, it's like being in a car, and like OCD is just the driver, right? And so like being that pause point, it allows you get to apply a brake. It's just like slowing like your brain down enough to even realize that you have the ability to make a choice. Because otherwise with OCD, you don't, like you're just going into that bubble like totally willingly. This just takes you. So that pause just lets you just take a beat and just notice for a second, okay, wait, but I don't have to go there. Like this isn't an autonomous driving car. I've got control.
Yeah, thanks. Do you have to practice then the slowing down of the obsessional doubt sequence, because so many people have that really primal feeling of fear or disgust or something like that without understanding the whole story behind it? It's like they cross the bridge in a millisecond. They don't.
Yeah.
But you have to do the pre-work, or was it something that kind of comes naturally to be able to pause and understand what that pause feels like?
I definitely think that there needs to be a slowing down, because you can get slingshotted into the bubble, like you said, in milliseconds, right? You're triggered, you're gone, you're out there. So there needs to be this very conscious curiosity and slowing down of the process to help you understand. And like I said, one of the things that always helps keep me off the bridge is knowing the tricks and cheats of the OCD con man. I can go, oh, that's an out of context fact that's trying to grab me and pull me into the bubble. Oh, that's reverse reasoning. That's this that's that. So that's one of my favorites anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for answering my questions, guys.
I'll
Sure
add
thing.
to one of the questions that my clients have responded that's very helpful is, what about my reality seems irrelevant? Right? And so we're kind of getting them thinking about like, what about right now is irrelevant? Instead of, a lot of times we're like, what's relevant over here in the bubble, right? It kind of flips it to where they're really looking at this trust, right? Like, what about me trusting my situation seems irrelevant? And that they like to pause, you know, that there is a slowing down, but a lot of my clients have found that very helpful. And I think that is in the module too, that exact question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that the slowing down or just stopping at the bridge is also to be able to identify what is taking me over the bridge to start with, and what can sort of bring me back, or what is taking me into the bubble and what's bringing me back. And that's always influence confusion, right? This generation of possibilities that dismisses the senses and that takes them into the OCD bubble. It's always a dismissal of our out of context fact. It can, in that moment, you can sort of what do you consider relevant and irrelevant in that moment. In terms of slowing it down, I mean, this whole bridge exercise sort of builds upon the previous exercises, right? Where you also, the whole obsessional sequence is about slowing it down as well. The very first exercise is sort of an awareness training, right? To become aware of the process. It's actually from an IBA perspective, the obsessional sequence is a very, it's not, but to some extent it's a superficial process. It's sort of like the outside of the OCD. The inner workings of the OCD that creates the doubt is something that you later get into the narrative, right? But slowing it down to start there is very important, and then it comes back with reality sensing. You bring back everything else into it, including the reasoning narrative and what takes you over the bridge, what brings you back into reality, what can bring you back to reality, and what brings you into the bubble. You know? So it creates the moment, and then exactly as Katie said, that's the most important part. It brings, I think that's the essential part of it, brings back agency. OCD is not something that just happens to you. It doesn't just happen. There's something that you're doing, right? And if you're doing something, you can do something else. So it brings, so it's very empowering in that sense. Beautiful presentation, by the way, Katie. I really enjoyed it. Like you said, in the 70s and in the 80s, I come from the Netherlands, so we grew up with this whole nuclear power thing. And actually, one of my favorite presentations to do in high school, and I recycled the same presentation over and over, was about nuclear fallout, nuclear winter. So it was very interesting to see. I see they've advanced with all kinds of different calculators online. I didn't know about those. Pretty amazing. Yeah. What I found also very interesting about your presentation, if I can comment, is that you're sort of merging this, that OCD can sometimes start with a true uncertainty, right? Or it can be the trigger. It's sort of a true uncertainty, right? I mean, for already 70 years, we lived with a possibility of a nuclear war. It's possible, right? And it's in a way a true uncertainty as well. But there's this interesting crossover point. At what point is it just an anxiety? But at what point does it become an OCD? And obviously in your case, it was OCD. So even though something can start with a true uncertainty and then would maybe just be an anxious worry or preoccupation like all of us had also with COVID, at what point does it cross over into OCD? What would you say, what really differentiate this for you from OCD or from just a general anxiety about a nuclear war?
You know, for me, this is a theme that I've had for a very long time, right? To even become aware that something could be a threat automatically starts to become, oh my God, this is going to happen. And I think that is where the crossover point for me is, that it stops being like, ooh, that's really uncomfortable. And it starts to be, what do I need to do to prevent this? What do I need to do to act on all of the contingencies that could come out of this? It's a statement of possibility, and then this feeling of responsibility that comes afterwards, where it's not just, oh, yikes, things are kind of going to hell right now. It's, oh, yikes, things are going to hell right now. And here's all of the terrible, horrible things that could happen. And I need to prepare for every single one of them, which is exhausting.
Sorry. I'm sorry I lost your sound, but you're bringing it into the here and now quite strongly, right? Which I think is because it's future oriented to some extent, but at the same time, it's almost like immediate, relevant to the here and now. That's what the OCD does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And again, 5 months on has failed to manifest, at least for me. Failed again.
A quick question. This is Kimberly. I found it really interesting, you know, like when I think about all of our training in ERP, and while you were talking, I mean, I love this approach, but I was also thinking, what would I have been doing differently had I not known this approach, right? Like in terms, and you said you did exposure therapy. So, you know, all those movies that you said you watched and scared you, I mean, we would be really encouraging you to go back to that type of thing and tolerate the distress and change your relationship with your thoughts. So just because you have lived experience, could you give us a couple minutes on, you know, just how this is different than when you would do exposure? And did you think at all when you were in the bubble that I better do some exposure to get out of this bubble? Or did you feel like all you needed was to pause, you know, stop compulsing and really see the crossover point?
Yeah, and you know what, that's actually, I got hung up with that on myself because I'm thinking, what would an exposure be for this? I'm already saturating myself in the worst case scenario every minute that I'm awake. I am reading about nuclear fallout. I'm reading about, you know, Chernobyl, nuclear explosions, Sellafields, 3 Mile Island, so that I can prepare myself better. And it just, you know, like saturating myself in that was compulsive. So for me, I think the response prevention was the exposure, right? To refuse to do the compulsion. And that would be my exposure. I'm going to choose to not do this shit anymore. And I'm going to sit with the residual feelings of, oh, what if I need to do this? And what if I need to do that? And what if I need to do this? But also part of that work was refusing to tell myself the story and get saturated in reality instead of my imagination, to get saturated in living my life here and now in this present moment, instead of going down the rabbit hole and coming up with all of these contingency plans for this imaginary scenario. So I don't think that this is somewhere where like a script would work or an imaginal exposure would work, because I was already doing, you know, I was doing that compulsively, right? And we don't want to do
I mean, probably what I would have done if I would have had you go back and watch those movies or look at those images that you shared with us, but really work on changing, you know, your story in a sense. I mean, in some ways, and I think Frank said this to me early on, he said, maybe you were already doing IBT, but, you know, to me, part of exposure was learning to change your relationship with that thought or trigger or whatever. But what I find interesting is that, I mean, you were really absorbed and you were able to get yourself out even once you're in the bubble without doing exposure therapy. And I think that's just going to be the interesting piece to all of this to me, is to see, you know, does that really play out for everybody?
Right. And I can say that I can do it now pretty reliably. On a really good days. There are some days where it's hard. There are some days where it's harder to do. And I am getting more practiced at dropping the story and coming back to the here and now, because it's becomes almost as habitual as going there to begin with. And so this is something that is like, it took me time to learn how to do this, because it's a very different way to use my brain to stay in the here and now. I'm not very good at that, to stay in the here and now instead of going way over here into worst case scenario all the time.
Yeah, definite practice.
What if it was the opposite? What if like you were an avoider? So you were like, yeah, I'm so scared of this. I won't turn the TV on. I won't watch anything news related. You know, my husband's watching Chernobyl. I make him go in the other room.
Right.
like, what if you're not an information seeker, you're an information avoider? Like, same IBT process, but would you actually say, oh, what would it be like for you to watch the news? Like, not specifically about Ukraine, but like, maybe it pops up. Like, is that an exposure you would encourage for someone?
You know, I found that early in my recovery, ERP did it for me for avoiding. I had a lot of avoidance compulsions, and I had to she made me get in there and saturate myself with all this shit I had been trying to avoid for so long, and she made me do them all, and I did them, and it's not, it really isn't an issue for me anymore. So yeah, I think exposure, you know, I don't see that I-CBT and ERP are not compatible. Right. So we could deconstruct, like, what would be the story I'm telling myself about why I can't watch this?
I wanted to just kind of briefly share my experience with this exact same theme that Katie's sharing. I have OCD as well. I have lived experience, and I had this exact same theme. And in the very beginning, when I was trying to implement ERP, I had a lot of avoidance tendencies as well, like not wanting to be at least 15 minutes outside of the perimeter of my house, because, you know, what if a nuclear was going to happen? And so I was doing ERP, like, you know, running 20 minutes outside of the house, or like physically running, like, you know, then 25 minutes out of the house. And then I started to learn I-CBT and really apply I-CBT to this theme. And once I was able to pull myself out of that bubble, there was no exposures that were necessary, because I wasn't believing the lies that my OCD was telling me anymore. So once I was able to use I-CBT for this, I just naturally didn't need to do any exposures following it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you don't have to call it exposure. You could just call it like living your life normally, right? Like, but if you're avoiding watching something, right, then that's kind of artificial based on like living in the bubble, right? So,
Right. No, exactly. It's just want to make the point. ERP has a certain model behind it, a mechanism of change, right? And so we don't really know that mechanism of change. So it's not like, in the same way, OCD bubble is quite similar to the idea of neutralization in an appraisal-based model of OCD, or in any CBT model. You know, it's also similar to response prevention, like Katie said. Like, you sort of stop compulsing. So you can call it response prevention, which is sort of a term that implies a learning model automatically. You can also call it going back to reality and staying out of the OCD bubble, which would be a different type of model, which is I-CBT. Or you can things that are sort of like similar throughout different treatments. You know, I think you brought up a very good point, though, Ryan, which is that that if there is avoidance, you know, that's where exposure, I think, can be useful. But response prevention, as it's called in ERP, is across treatments. You see it in ACTs, you see it in mindfulness. They all have this stopping of the. It's not a functional activity, right? Compulsion. So whatever you want to give it a neutral term or a neutral label, it's not a functional activity. It's sort of like reinforces what you actually don't want. You know, so there are similarities between these treatments, but I think in terms of exposure, in many cases, in some cases, can be useful, or at least approaching these situations either through narrative, identifying the obsessional narrative, or through calling it no longer avoiding. You know, but yeah, I mean, there are similarities between treatments in those terms. You know, in IBA, we also ask people with reality sensing to approach certain obsessional situations, you know, at the end of treatment, after the work has been done, you know. So,
well, I want to thank everyone for coming, and one of us will post a follow-up post in the Facebook group when we get time this afternoon, and I'm hoping that we can also continue some of this discussion there, because this is really great discussion. Katie, that was so amazing and so helpful. And I hope that you'll also share the presentation with us in the group.
Absolutely. Too. Thanks everybody for listening to me.
I had a quick question, Katie and Bronwyn. Are you